Hi, Sam. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, Elijah. Thank you very much. How are you?
Beautiful. I'm doing fine as well. Thank you for asking. And, like I mentioned earlier, thank you for coming. It means a whole lot. Thank you so much. Okay, Sam. I am quite excited to have you on the show for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking, because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. And you see, Sam, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew also means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking, of which makes our conversation here today so important to me and even to the audience. Now, the second reason is for the sake of my audience now. I believe there are some things that Sam knows that some of my audience needs to hear you say these stuff, directly from your mouth in order for them to get unstuck or experience transformation. I firmly believe that. And lastly, that is me. I am convinced that I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from your insight, story, and experiences. So, for that reason, Sam, let's get started with your introduction and talk to us about your journey, how you got here. And afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Sam, over to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Elijah. I think you articulated that magnificently. I love that your approach to, the light and the dark, ignorance and knowledge. Couldn't agree more. And my very quick bio, I've been protecting people and teaching them how to protect themselves for the last almost 30 years. I was a Marine officer in the United States, got out in 1996, which feels like a million years ago today, but ended up landing in a field of work called the close protection industry, basically, as most people think of it, as bodyguarding. So I protected a variety of high profile people, from dignitaries and heads of state to celebrities like Tom Cruise, high net people like Warren Buffett, things like that. But I have a philosophy, and that philosophy is that it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim. So I've really focused the last 20 years of my life teaching people the same skills and tools that we use to protect public figures. And this all culminated in the writing of a book called Live Ready. And, my approach in the book, in this concept, really it comes back to a lot of what you mentioned, in that, what I have found to be the case is no matter what the situation, the lifeguards, people may be there to help us and they may be on their way, but no matter what the crisis, we're going to be on our own. And in life, having worked with a lot of high net worth people and a lot of people who have objectively conquered the majority of life in terms of finances and stability and esteem and all of these various things that, the old philosopher Abraham Maslow used to talk about as the hierarchy of human needs, going from food, clothing, and shelter all the way up to this idea of self-actualization, of having the ability to live your life on your own terms. I found a lot of them are insecure, and they're very insecure in a very specific way, in that they really understand fundamentally that even though they are well protected by society and they have financial security, they know that someone could take that away in a second. And they wanted to understand this dimension of security, which happens to come in at the second level, just beyond food, clothing, and shelter and basic subsistence needs in Maslow's hierarchy. Security is the next need. And I found that no matter how competent and how knowledgeable we become, if we don't have control or a sense of confidence over our own personal security and our own ability to manage chaos or crises, then we really have this insecurity that affects other aspects of our life, our personality, how we engage with people, the risks we take, the amount of life we live. So that's the reason why I decided to write this book, Live Ready. And I've sort of shifted my mission just a little bit from just self-defense and workplace training to really this more higher arching objective of making sure people can live more confident, secure lives so that they can really live life more self-actualized on their own terms.
Hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great one. And I feel like your book is a must read and very important book. And thank you for writing the book and, putting solution down so that other people can benefit from it and apply it to their lives. That's a good one. Now,
Thank you.
in your book, you mentioned two myths, all right? The myth of
Yes.
helplessness and the myth of randomness. Okay, can you explain what these are and why changing this mindset is important?
Absolutely. So I believe that most people are under these two myths. So we've been conditioned by society. We believe that we are helpless in the face of certain kinds of danger or trouble. And, this manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But a lot of people will say to themselves things like, how could you respond to a terrorist attack or an active shooter event or something like that? If the guy's got a gun, if you're not a trained and professional law enforcement officer or something like that, armed and armored, how could you respond? People think things like, well, the guy was bigger than her. How could she possibly defend herself? And they tend to think of it as the physical nature of security. But to me, you are never helpless as long as you can control one factor, if that factor is your mind, your ability to think and make decisions. And the analogy I like to use is the analogy of how they used to train circus elephants. The way they used to train circus elephants was they would take a baby elephant and chain it to a stake in the ground. And this baby elephant would pull and pull on that chain until eventually it just gives up. And what this means is that a human handler can lead it around on the end of the rope when it's fully grown, largest, most powerful land mammal on the planet. And in the mind of the elephant, it's helpless to resist. This is not true. The elephant is not born with this thinking that it is helpless to do anything. It becomes conditioned. And I believe we have all been very, very similarly conditioned. And overcoming that conditioning comes back to this notion that, our greatest fear really isn't that we are helpless. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I want people to be able to embrace their ability to control life and to control their circumstances or to influence it, not necessarily control it, but to influence it to their own design. The myth of randomness really speaks directly to the idea of violence. People tend to think that violence is random. We hear it all the time in the news. It was an act of random violence. People say things like no one saw it coming or someone just snapped. But the reality is that violence is a process, and it's a process as observable and predictable as boiling water if you know what to look for and know how and when to look. So the concept is that when you talk about knowledge and this idea of light, and bring that into our lives, the direct knowledge of how to recognize danger, what to do if you think you're being targeted to avoid trouble, and how to protect yourself empowers people on a level that means that they are never fundamentally helpless. They know how to think, make decisions, and it's not about the physical. It's really about our ability to operate within the domain of chaos, right? And understand that life can be chaotic. Violence in its most extreme sense, what we're talking about there is the most extreme human interaction of someone else trying to hurt you. If you have confidence in that domain, you can have confidence in every other domain of your life.
Amazing. Oh man, Sam, just like I mentioned before you started talking, that I am convinced that I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from you, and that is happening already. Wow, I love
Thank
that.
you.
Okay, so that's going to lead to the second question, and now I want to talk about fear. And you see, before I say out the question, I watched a movie, though I'm not done with it yet. I think the story was written by Seth Hoffman or something. Prison Break. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an old movie. Yeah,
I don't
so
think I. Mhm.
okay. So there's this guy, the very intelligent Michael Scofield now. I noticed that anytime he's in the midst of, I sense, stress, his life is endangered. There is a problem now, and it's a tough one now. He never entertained fear. There's always this courage on his face, and the other one, his name was Bellic, and you would have seen the fear written all over him. His voice started shaking, all of that. But this particular guy never entertained fear. So that's going to lead to the question now. How does fear affect decision making in dangerous situations? How can people really reduce fear to make better decisions in high stress moment? Do you get that?
Yes. So fear is something that is ever present, and it is ever present in just about every aspect of our lives. It influences our decision making, whether we're talking about in a crisis, whether it's a violent crisis, some other kind of emergency, or whether it's just in general. We are living in many ways the most uncertain times that we have ever lived as humans on this planet. Okay. These are very uncertain times and conditions, particularly like in the United States, a lot of uncertainty, rising costs, fear about can I pay my bills, fear about violence, fear about everything. And the idea here is that fear massively affects our ability to think and make decisions, and it inhibits us. And it's not that fear is bad. Fear is a very powerful and positive faculty that we have. It allows us to recognize danger. It allows us as an internal warning mechanism that we are about to do something or possibly face something that could be anything from life-threatening to, something that's just a bad decision. The concept, though, is that when fear is not managed correctly, it influences our decision-making too much. And at the most extreme end, when we're faced with danger, fear inhibits our decision-making process on a physiological level. So, the idea, if I frame it like this, if you're walking down the street and someone's approaching you and we get an immediate fear vibe, the hair stands up on the back of our necks, we get a chill run down our spine, we think something could be amiss, there's something not right here. That is fear. And it's the part of our brain called our limbic system, the mid part of our brain that controls that and manages what I call our radar, our ability to recognize danger. This is a very important faculty that we have. And when we recognize that intuitively or through the physiological processes, what happens is we now can make better decisions. Now, the problem that we have is we have a tendency to dismiss or minimize that kind of fear. We look at it and say, oh, I don't see any evidence, so it's probably nothing, or I'm just, I'm overreacting, or, we play the social contract game where we say, but I don't want to judge a book by its cover. And what we have a tendency to do in the moment of potential violence is when we're looking at people and we get a fear vibe, we have a tendency to dismiss it or override it. And my recommendation is, first and foremost, go ahead and embrace it. Recognize that the fear will pass on its own when you are out of that environment of danger. At the end of the day, though, if you dismiss it, you are now more vulnerable. You're more likely to be caught unaware. So my recommendation right out of the gate is to recognize that fear is good. Fear is not a negative, okay? But when we don't have plans, when we don't have experience, fear can overwhelm us. In the most extreme sense, if we are faced with a stimulus, doesn't matter what it is, someone's pointing a gun at us, a guy walks in and starts shooting at people, there's a crazy dog running around, whatever it is, if we don't have any experience, what we have a tendency to do is to freeze. And fear's normal reflex in terms of how it influences our behavior is not to somehow allow us to rise to the occasion. What we end to do is we tend to fall to our level of training or preparedness. And if we've never prepared for that stimulus, we tend to just freeze. The most extreme type of freezing behavior is what is called tonic immobility, where people are literally shut down, playing dead. Okay? In any active shooting event where you hear of survivors, People who survive will sometimes say, I didn't know what to do, so I played dead. That was not a conscious coping mechanism. What it was an overwhelming fear response to the point of an overwhelming paralysis effect, where the decision and the ability to perform was taken from you. So that's the most extreme. It happens in extreme violence like terrorism or incidences of sexual assault or rape. It happens very commonly in those dynamics. But this freeze reflex is what inhibits behavior no matter what. It makes decision-making hard. On a physiological level, it makes it hard to access our higher thought processes because our limbic system gets in control and wants to dictate behavior. So the challenge is, how do we overcome that? The number one way of overcoming that is experience. You see, our ability to think comes down to an analysis phase. And when we analyze what's going on, our ability to base it off of I've seen this before or I've seen something similar that allows me to manage this, experience and prior training or generally preparedness allows us to have plans of action that we can follow. It doesn't matter what the domain we're talking about, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's, family and raising kids, an emergency with a car accident, it doesn't matter. Having prior plans, having preparedness builds confidence, and in the crisis allows you to think and make better decisions. The better trained you are, the more swiftly and the more competently you can make those decisions. And when we look at the broader perspective of just life in general, the effort of going through the process of preparedness, whether it's through training of martial arts, training of self-defense skills, or training for just to be able to handle difficult circumstances, that could come by way of military training, come by way of civilian training, challenging yourself, doing hard things. Overcoming things creates a bank of reserve resources that says, I've been in difficult times before, and I know I can get through this. I just have to be able to get it under control. Now, in the moment, I want to give everybody who's listening a tool. Okay, here's the problem, Elijah. If we are experiencing extreme fear, survival level fear, it can overwhelm us. Okay, and if we don't have enough experience or training, it can overwhelm us immediately. And you cannot manifest that level of extreme adrenaline and fear through your thoughts. And you cannot pull yourself out of it just through your thoughts. You can't talk your way out of it internally. You have to have a technique. And the technique and the tool is ancient. It's something that everybody knows intuitively, and that is our breathing control. All right. So being able to practice and consciously use breathing, you can systematically pull yourself out of that extreme red zone of adrenaline where you can't think physiologically, can't make decisions, maybe even falling into paralysis, total tonic immobility. And we can bring ourselves back to a performance level where we can actually operate. And the technique that's taught nowadays to combat soldiers and elite operators around the world is what's called a box breathing pattern. Box breathing is nothing but a yoga breathing technique. They just call it tactical breathing so that the tactical guys want to do it, right? But box breathing is you inhale for a 4 count, you hold for a 4 count, you exhale for a 4 count, and then you hold again for a 4 count, all right? And if we were to do this, all right, we inhale, we hold, then we exhale, and then we hold. What happens is you rewire your brain. And on a nervous system level, the more you practice this, you're making your money, if you will, on the hold after the exhale at a time where we convulsively want to breathe, we feel like we're drowning. And if you persist in practicing this when you're not under stress, what happens is you become comfortable in an uncomfortable moment, in a very primal, uncomfortable moment. And by becoming comfortable being uncomfortable, right, we rewire our brain to say, hey, when I need to use this technique in a moment of crisis, it settles our nervous system down and brings us back to a point where we can think and make decisions. Now, that doesn't help you a lot if you're in the fight. You're not going to be breathing consciously. That's where you have to have skill sets and training, okay? But when you're getting into that moment and the stress is rising and you're in a crisis, whatever it is, or you're in a difficult moment, practice box breathing. And that's a way of physically taking the tool and using the tool to manipulate or to manage that stress. The only caveat to this, the only trick to it is you have to practice it. So I do it every day. I do it when I'm driving. I do it anytime I'm stressed. And what I'm doing is I'm constantly retraining and nurturing and developing my nervous system to be able to manage fear on a higher level. Does that make sense?
Amazing. A whole lot, a whole lot. You know, Sam, there is this excitement and joy that just leaps within one's mind when you learn something amazing. That's how I'm feeling right now. You know, this stuff you mentioned, this is actually the very first time I would be hearing about this amazing words you've said. Well explained and very, very educating, and I love that. Okay, so to
Thank
bring
you.
this to an end, Sam, yeah, what would you like to leave the audience with, like a final thought? And to those ones who would like to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing, you know, maybe you said some things that resonate well with them and they would like to learn more. How can that be possible?
The only thought I'd like to leave everyone with is that truly you are never helpless and violence is never random, right? I would encourage you greatly. Pick up a copy of my book. It's available on Amazon. It's available digitally. It's available on audio. So if you want to listen, you can get it on audible.com and hear me narrating it. It is the handbook. This is the handbook for how to protect yourself and live with greater certainty in an uncertain world. It teaches you how to protect not only yourself, but your family, how to protect your organization better, and how to think in terms of thinking differently about your own personal power of not just violence, but life in general, being able to take chances and live life on your own terms. My goal is to try and help people become more self-actualized and to master this level of the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, and to give solutions to problems that are real. There's not a single person out there who wouldn't say security is not a high priority, possibly even just behind health. Health and security are vital to everyone. And this is a way of establishing that. And so that, and the net effect is you can live better, more fulfilling lives. You can get the book at my website, livereadybook.com. You can find me on social media. My handle is always the same, Live Ready Co, Live Ready CO on Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And certainly you can find the book online and on Amazon. I'd encourage everyone to get it. I really believe in it. This was my contribution to the world. I know that I can only see so many people in person. I'm blessed to be able to have opportunities to share this vision and this work with people like you, Elijah. But my way is to deliver this through the book. So that's my takeaway: is get the book, read it, reach out to me if you have questions.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. I think I would have to invite you to the show again because there are still some things we haven't talked about yet, like the three types of bad guys. I think that will be
Mm-hmm.
when next you come. So thank you so very much for, sharing those
Happy
powerful
about
words
that.
with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elijah. You take care, and thank you.